Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the afternoon session. We're going to talk about something called the Academic Alignment and Innovation Program. I'm assuming this microphone is working. Everybody's looking my direction. Great. My name is Andrew Ware. I'm the chair of the Department of Physics and Astronomy here on campus. And this past year, I had the pleasure of chairing the Academic Alignment and Innovation Program Task Force. And that was a look at an overview of all the programs, looking in detail at each of the academic programs on campus, and then seeing how well they fit together, and then also thinking about possible new programs for the University of Montana. We looked at ways we could do more activities in the area of interdisciplinary studies, in online and international programming. So those were some of our charge. And then over the course of that year, we got a lot of input from all over campus, from chairs and directors of different programs. I had regular meetings with the provost. This was done in collaboration with the provost. And it was done as part of the charge that the president gave to the faculty senate and the provost. So I was chosen by the faculty senate and the provost for that role. And then at the end of the year, the committee had a report back to the faculty senate, provost, and president. And then this year, at the State of the University address, President Engstrom challenged the campus to respond to the AIP report, to look at it, to go through it, and try to prioritize of all the things that we addressed, both those programs on campus ready for growth, those programs on campus that were challenged, and those other activities that we could possibly do, as well as possible new programs. What should we prioritize? You know, and in looking at the AIP report, what should be our priorities moving forward? And so this conference and this session, which is held in conjunction now with University Council, I want to thank Peggy Kerr, Vice President Peggy Kerr, I think there she is, for adjusting the schedule of University Council so that we could have this session focused on AIP as well as part of the conference. And what we're going to do now is I'm going to introduce the panel to my right. We're going to have them each give about 4 to 5 minutes on the questions that are in the program. And specifically the questions are, what are the key findings in the AIP report? What are the next steps in response to the AIP report? How do we encourage more innovation at UM? And how frequently should UM go through a process of academic alignment? So this is some of the questions I have for them, but I've given it open to them. They can answer one of these, all of these, or they can go at a different slant, if they will, on AIP. And then after that, we're going to open it up for questions from you, and then we're going to have breakout sessions for the second hour of this session. So I want to thank all my panelists first. We have Associate Dean Jenny McNulty, who's also a professor in mathematical sciences and the Associate Dean of the College of Humanities and Sciences. Professor Bill Borrie, who is now the chair of Faculty Senate. Professor of Forestry as well. Dean Bobby Evans of the Phyllis J. Washington College of Education and Human Sciences. Thank you. And then finally we have Professor Alan Szalda-Petree, who is a professor of psychology. And I want to say that Associate Dean McNulty and Professor Szalda-Petree were both members of the AIP committee, and then I would say Professor Borrie and Dean Evans were part of the group now responding to that for Faculty Senate and for the academic officers responding to the report. So without further ado, let's start to my right with Dean McNulty.
Thanks, Andrew. It's great to be here, and I was part of the committee, and it was great to be on that committee. I want to start by telling you a little bit about the work we did on the committee. So first we were charged, and this is kind of paraphrasing in my words, to examine our portfolio of academic programs and do so in a way that's consistent with our mission and strategic plan, building a university for a global century. As you can imagine, that's a big task. We have lots of programs, and there are lots of ways to come about this. The first question we had to tackle, which surprisingly took us quite a bit of time, was, what is a program? Then we had to ask, how do we measure the health of each program? How do we measure innovation? And how do we measure academic alignment? So these conversations took quite a bit of time, and we learned quite a bit about our university in the process. We used 18 metrics from a period of 5 years. I didn't count how many programs, over 100. So a lot of data. We complemented the quantitative analysis with a qualitative analysis, which consists of department chairs, survey, and program review. And the program reviews usually included comments from external evaluators. We also used the report from the work group on academic programming. I want to digress just a little bit and talk about data. I've been asked lots of questions about the data we used, and I just want to say, I love data. I love math. I love math. I love math. I love data. And I think using data to make informed decisions is very, very important. Data doesn't lie, or does it? As the one popular book, How to Lie with Statistics, implies, one can use data to tell very different stories. For example, I examined one of the programs deemed as enrollment challenged and used different data over a longer period of time and computing different averages. And I concluded the program was growing, not shrinking. So while mathematics is black and white, using it to make conclusions often results in paradoxes. One that appears in computing averages quite often is Simpson's paradox, which we sometimes teach in our introductory math classes. My point is not that we shouldn't use data. Of course we should use data, and of course we should use data consistently. My point is, once we have compiled data, we have to use our training, our liberal education training, our critical thinking, to analyze, interpret, and use the data. I think the next step is the most important, how we use this data. Now I'll answer one of the questions. What did we learn? First, I think we learned we have a lot going on this campus. We have a ton of things going on. Whether it's courses or programs or certificates, we have a lot going on. As an aside, maybe we should look at standardizing or simplifying our structures to make it a little easier for our students to navigate. It took us a long time to determine what the definition of a program is. Overall, I think we found that our programs are well aligned to our strategic plan. That's not to say we can't do better. We also have programs that are declining in enrollment and ones that are growing in enrollment. I think we also learned that we have to work on our vocabulary so that we all know what we mean when we speak of a liberal education. In reading the charge to the task force, which I looked at again this morning, President Engstrom actually called for the creation of an AAIP, where P stands for program, not the creation of a task force. Perhaps we should view the task force and its report as step one of an ongoing program. I think there's 3 aspects that need further attention, and I hope we can address this later in the breakout session and later throughout the year. First is the importance of our liberal education. This conference is a great start. Thank you for everyone who is putting this on. There are excellent and inspiring speakers, panel discussions, and breakout sessions. What else can we do to educate both internally and externally? Every year I come to the Distinguished Alumni Award reception, and in these very seats, which I'm so happy to be sitting in, our distinguished alumni talk about how important their education at the University of Montana was and how important a liberal education is to them. How can we tap these great examples? How can we help our faculty and our students, or how can we help our faculty answer our students, when they ask questions like, why do I have to take a science class? No, I'm not using math as an example. Nate McCrady's comments yesterday were spot on why scientific literacy is important. Perhaps we should collect answers like this and put them on a web page. Why do I need to take a class in blank? Innovation. I think the task force did a very good job of looking at academic alignment. I don't think we did a good job of measuring innovation. How do we measure innovation? Perhaps this is something that we can look at in our next phase. Maybe we could have a competition or a showcase on innovation in the classroom or outside the classroom. Maybe we could ask our external evaluators that come in to analyze our programs the specific question, how is this program innovative? They have the expertise perhaps to answer this question. Lastly, I think we need to look at how do we expand on our interdisciplinary online and international programs. I would like us to be a university that is constantly striving to be better. I would like us to be a university that provides training in critical thinking as well as critical skills. And I would like us to be a university of action. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. Bill.
So I'll start off by pointing out something which has become pretty obvious to me, and I think it's represented by the folks here on the stage. This was a faculty-led project that involved almost all of the campus. Nearly everybody on campus was, at least the programs were touched in one way or another by this process. A majority of faculty leadership can do a campus-wide consideration of all of our academic programs. It was daunting, and perhaps one of the great achievements is that we turned the temperature down on this conversation. There were folks who looked around the country and saw program prioritization, picking winners and losers, reassigning resources from one place to another. And we said, that's not what we wanted to do on this campus. And I think 12, 14 months later, we can say that there's been a very healthy conversation, a data-driven conversation, but that the data just began that conversation. And many of the units, many of the program leads, the department chairs, the deans, welcomed the conversations that AAIP brought on. I'll follow up on something that Jenny said. There were really no surprises in this process. I think many of the ready-to-grow programs were already seen as being valuable programs that were hitting the ball out of the ballpark, and they were already attracting resources, both internal and external resources. Similarly, many of the challenged programs sort of had already started to retool themselves or relocate themselves, and had already begun coming up with strategies, maybe a marketing strategy, maybe an emphasis strategy to address their declining enrollments. And similarly, many of the new programs had already begun that process of reaching out to industry, reaching out to colleagues around the country, and thinking about, dreaming about, if we were to build an emphasis in this area, what would it look like? And so those programs were already bubbling up amongst the faculty and the leadership on this campus. We learned that it's an interconnected ecosystem. Andrew's group took a program-by-program approach, but one of the insights as a result of this is just how tightly bound some of our programs are on this campus. And you can look at it in a number of ways. You can look at it as foundational courses leading to the success of some of the upper division activities. You couldn't succeed with some of those upper division programs without a solid foundation having been laid by other programs on campus. We see an interconnection between graduate programs and undergraduate programs. We see connections between graduate programs where PhD students and master's students rely upon one another. We also see many of the interdisciplinary, international and online programs also being fed by other programs. It's not that we need set interdisciplinary programs, set international programs, set online programs, because everybody on this campus at the moment is feeding into those activities. It's very much a part of the DNA of our campus. I'll pick up on something else that Jenny said, which is the notion of experimentation. Faculty tend to be closest to the ground. We're in the classroom day after day. We're receiving direct feedback from our students day after day. And we have a lifelong commitment to our specialties. But we also spend a lot of our time working with industry and working with groups within society. We do that within our summer activities, but we also do it within our advisory boards and our alumni group. And it's out of those interactions, as well as national level and international level interactions, that we learn about trends and we respond to and investigate those trends that we hear about on a weekly and yearly basis. So I believe that a bottom-up rather than a top-down approach is going to be part of how we are going to innovate going forward. And I think a sense of experimentation, I heard it yesterday in one of the sessions, just about any program can try a few experimental courses. And let's test the water. Let's dip our toes in and see what the temperature is like. And if the students, as the students will, respond and say, can I get a minor in this, or is there a certificate that I can develop? Or if we hear from our industry and our societal partners equally asking for, can we get more certification in this area? You then start attracting more faculty and more students and grow from experimentation through certificates, minors, into majors, and then perhaps on into graduate programs as well. It's an exhausting process. And is it one that we should consider repeating? I think it is necessary to continue to ask ourselves, how aligned are we with strategic directions? And we constantly need to be asking ourselves, are we as innovative as we need to be? Are we as distinctive as we need to be? One of the messages I've heard over the last couple of months is that UM can't and shouldn't try to be all things to all people. So what is it that makes this campus distinctive? We're in a great location and we have great people, and many campuses claim a similar thing. So what is it that we do particularly well and that we want to continue to be known for, because that will draw our peers and that will draw our students to campus. And I think that challenge remains in front of us.
Thank you, Bill. Bobby.
I'd like to begin by offering a sort of backdrop setting for 5 points to be made about the AAIP. But first, I do greatly appreciate the work of the committee and also tremendously your leadership on it, Andrew. And I found the report incredibly important for the campus and certainly for my college. But by way of background, I would like to offer that we exist in a particular context of change or resistance to change in some cases. And any report or white paper based on data, quantitative and qualitative, really is only as beneficial to us as we choose to make it. So we have to reflect upon how we change and what it means to change in a strategic way for alignment. We also have to talk about communication around that change, and I would submit that one of the great assets of the report itself was that it was so multidimensional. There isn't a person on this campus who isn't aware of the activity and didn't have an opportunity to participate in providing input to the report. And finally, part of that change culture, we need also, I think, to assess not only what the context is and what we are, but sitting next to a psychologist, I will say, is that what we really want to be? Is that how we really want to operate? Is that optimum for the university we love? So I offer 5 points about the AAIP. I think, first of all, right now it should be renamed. It should instead be called Authorize Action Institute Progress. That without acting on this report, and particularly given the fact that experienced people at UM say there were not many surprises, I think we might have had enough reports. Let's act. The second point I would like to make is really founded upon some tremendous input from this conference. And I have to say I've learned a great deal, I've given great thought to it, and the way the AAIP fit into this entire conference is increasingly visible to me. At the academic officers' summer retreat, all the deans had analyzed the AAIP. The deans talked at that retreat about the balance between a liberal arts education and also the balance of professional schools. And I want to pause here just for a moment and submit that just as we have heard several wonderful people eloquently describe the fact that these are not diametrically opposed, we also don't seem to be fully and wholly grabbing onto a constellation that greatly embraces the professional schools. And I would submit that the liberal arts foundation is so powerful and beneficial and unique that it is, in fact, the truth. Our distinguished alumni often sit in these chairs and hearken back to those lessons. It is also the truth that they are distinguished alumni because of their careers. And we should, in my estimation, embrace more the cause and the challenges our professional schools face in providing those careers for people whose ultimately will be distinguished and distinguish the university. So it's not diametrically opposed. It is a scaffolding process our faculty can and should embrace. My third point has already been mentioned by Professor Borrie, and it has to do with experimentation. Like many of you, I found I could write anything once I could label it draft, and I think we as a campus can try any program once we label it a pilot. Despite limited and finite resources, we can make shifts, and we can, as deans, as academic officers, and as cabinet members representing other budgets around this campus, identify some key places where that shift should happen. In my college, there are several areas where that can and should occur, greatly needing resources following enrollment and rewarding those programs, and others where, frankly, there should be some slight shifts away. My final point has to do with a notion of growth. I think generally it's part of our culture when we refer to bottom-up growth that we are speaking of a wonderful organic approach to how a campus grows, how a mission is refined. But we can't deny there is also a very serious quest and need for inorganic growth. We need to strategize some of the items resultant from that report, affirmed by our experience, tested in the market, balanced nationwide, and recalibrated against our mission, and make some decisions for inorganic growth. Thank you.
Colin.
I'm not used to speaking into a microphone. This is loud enough? Okay. I am a psychologist, as it was pointed out, but I want to be clear, I'm not that kind of psychologist. I've been making that statement since I was in graduate school, and I've also struggled with how to explain what kind of psychologist I was to my parents 30 years ago. And somebody referenced me one time and said that I was a rats and stats guy, and I kind of like that. But it's fish and monkeys and rats and stats and that sort of thing. That's kind of comprehensive of it. But what I also am is a methodologist. And so the piece of the AAIP that interested me was not only what our objectives were, but how we get to them. Because I, like Dean McNulty, she likes numbers. I like the process, and I like to build the process that generates the numbers. And like to build that process so that those numbers are interpretable. And so I'm going to talk just a little bit about one of the findings that was most important for me, and that is the need for better data collection and anticipation for better data collection. The data warehouse that we worked with, actually multiple data warehouses, including individual staff members in departments as organic data warehouses, they presented a huge challenge for me in terms of how to interpret what we have. I'm not saying that what we have is bad. I'm just saying that there isn't a data set that I can't criticize, right? I'm not happy with my data sets. I'm not happy with your data sets. I'm not typically happy about data sets, okay? And so just to lay that out as the context. But this, what we got from this, I think, is looking at the data sets, looking at the way they've been compiled, looking at the way that they are or are not scalable, I think is going to be critical for what we do from here. I know that folks here are asking for action, and I'm kind of okay with asking for action. I'm not okay for asking for action without remeasurement. I mean, I'm a reinforcement theorist. When we talk about reinforcement, it's a change in behavior, usually an increase in the target behavior rate due to a contingent relationship between the target behavior and some outcome. You can only tell if something serves as a reinforcer if you measure the behavior again and again and again. And I don't think that we can be absolutely sure of our conclusions here from such a small time window. I mean, Andrew and Jenny, being on the committee, will know that I was always concerned about the 3 or 4 years that we decided to use as a measurement period, because I always want longer measurement periods. But I also recognized that we had a time frame to get the job done, and we couldn't wait around for the data warehouses to be reconstructed or whatnot, and so we went with what we had. But I don't think that we should stop there. And I also think that we should be aware that what we have here in terms of the AAIP report is a snapshot in time and space. And if we extend out the snapshot in either direction, we may see different results. But I think that's what we need to do as we go along. So on the fourth item here of the questions, it says, how frequently should we go through a process of academic alignment? And as a previous chair of a department, I'm going to say never, right? But, you know, as an individual who's interested and concerned about the growth of the University of Montana and the direction that we take, we have to find a reasonable period of time that doesn't have us spinning in, are we doing what we should be doing? Are we doing what we should be doing? Every 15 minutes and not doing what we need to be doing. I'm concerned about too many measurements and not enough behavior occurring between measurements. But I think that the recommendations that were made about the data warehouse can make this task a lot easier. I don't think the next time we go through this, if we make good progress in the data warehouse, that this task will be nearly as difficult. It'll still be difficult, but we won't be searching around for what kind of data can we get a hold of. As a methodologist, and I teach the undergraduate, the graduate methods classes, walking into the AAIP was my methodological nightmare, right? I mean, I have people come to my office and say, I collected all this data, tell me what I can do with it. I'm like, you can get out of my office. Because I like to be in on the front end where we determine what the constructs are that we're going to measure, we operationalize ways to measure them, and then we go and do that. When the data comes in already set, it's very difficult to do much with that. So I think, for me, the important piece will be the expansion and the maintenance of the data warehouse. We need to predict what kinds of measures, what kinds of constructs are going to be critically important for us to move forward, and then measure them and keep them. And then look at these data and consider where we are relative to where we want to be. That's what I took from this process. I mean, the individual programs that are challenged or ready for growth, I think those are all fine outcomes, and I was happy with the results that were produced. But I think I'm looking at this as a longer process. What can we do next and next? But it's not just action. It has to be action with then measurement to back that action up again and again. But not so frequently that all we're doing is measurement and no behavior. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. So now I'd like to open it up to the audience for questions of the panel. I think we have, yep, we still got plenty of time. There's a microphone here. If you want to go to the microphone, that'd be great. Come on up. We can start a line, but go ahead first.
Hi, I'm Eric Rose. I'm a data analyst at OCHI, so I love data too. And my question is, I know that when this project was first proposed, the scope was a little more narrow. In the future, will it be opened up to include things such as labor market statistics? Going through a quick analysis, I can see that the placement rate and wages of your challenge programs are significantly lower than some of the programs that you marked for potential high growth. So will there be any other analysis other than enrollment and graduation?
Yes. No, thank you for your question and for your comments. I think those are very good points. As Alan said, we were struggling with the data we had to be able to analyze it correctly over our whole programs. And I do think the next time we do it, and I agree, we should not act without measurement, but let's not do it too soon. The next time we do this, it would be awesome to include some data like that. Thanks for your comment.
Yeah, I mean, as a methodologist, I'm all about including as much data, as many constructs as possible. I do have some concerns about that data, though. I mean, not in the theoretical sense, but oftentimes I'm concerned about when we send out surveys to our graduates and we get information back from them about placements, about salaries, or compensation packages, if we want to put everything together in a piece. You know, our response rate is typically not terribly impressive. And so, again, as a methodologist, I'm always concerned about the potential bias that is represented in that data. Now, that doesn't mean that we should not consider the data, but I think that we have to be careful about how strongly we consider such data.
If you would like, I can provide Social Security matches to the Department of Labor's unemployment insurance warehouse. You already have those at OCHI.
Right, I mean, yeah, like I said, more data is better. As a psychologist, I get a little hesitant because we have very specific codes of ethics that may or may not allow me to do that sort of thing. You might have noticed that psychologists got in a little bit of trouble with the Department of Defense the last year or two. The code of ethics is in place to ensure that we don't violate anyone's specific rights. But I'd be interested in looking at that.
Thank you, Mr. Rose. And I'd be interested in doing something about that. For example, I'd be very interested in looking at the Ready for Growth programs and comparing them to what we know nationally about the kinds of data you suggest. We have actually on this campus in the past had a few return on investment proposals go forward to our provost, things where we were able to predict with some pretty good certainty that the national trend in exercise science, for example, and communicative sciences and disorders, speech-language pathologists, listing such jobs as speech-language pathology as one of Money Magazine's 10 hot jobs. In the state of Montana, a huge dearth in professionals needing that license. And frankly, looking across the success of research per faculty member in a program like exercise science, we could foreseeably predict that additional support for those kinds of faculty would both attract students into future careers and then provide them the kinds of careers that we know will be, I would contend, very meaningful and make them highly employable.
I would add that there's a challenge between short-term demand and long-term commitments. And those of us who enjoyed the conversation last night heard one of the captains of industry in our state describe a situation where we could have ramped up in one particular area only to find that demand dried up very quickly. Building a world-class faculty is a long and expensive endeavor, and they're hard to find, and people are always looking to poach the best of the best, and they find many good people at the University of Montana. So it is a long-term commitment in an area of strength that takes time to collectively build those people, maintain them here as part of a community that they feel they have an important and distinctive contribution to.
Thank you for the question.
Hi, I think most of you know me. I'm Diane Flamand. Can you hear me? And I agree with Ellen. I don't think you should have to do another study like this. Technology and data is important, but one source would be better, because we all know I did a lot of reporting for the university in programming, and I had problems with people drawing data from different sources, and also knowing how to write programming is important in knowing your data elements and that. And so I did enrollment management at the University of Montana, and so knowing how to pull that data and get the same results from everybody knowing how to pull that is very essential. One thing, and I believe President Engstrom, we're getting a data warehouse here, or a degree audit. Is that correct? Once we get the degree audit up here at the University of Montana, I think analyzing the degrees and majors and the outcomes is going to be a lot easier for the faculty and the deans and that to predict what the program and the outcomes are going to be, and also your enrollment stats for the university, and predict the sizes and the sections and everything. That is really essential for the universities. If you look at all other universities across the nation, they have a degree audit system, and students look at that to see their programs, and the liberal arts and everything that's in those programs is essential. It tells them what they need to pick. They get to pick their own gen eds and that out of those programs, but it's also a gen ed curriculum that helps them with their programs, and it's assigned, and they're not taking unessential courses that they don't need. Plus, they see how close they are to other minors or a second degree and everything. And it's less work for faculty and their advising curriculum once they have this type of system up. And I think it's really essential we get going forward and just getting that implemented as soon as possible, never having to do another one of these type of things for the faculty to waste the time on that. Let's waste our time on getting this type of program up and running, and so that we get the students to come back into the University of Montana, because this is a great university. I invested 33 years here. I'm dedicated to this university. I love this university, and I want this university to come back and thrive. And so that's what I have to say.
Thank you, Diane. So I'm not sure if there was a question there, but from a degree audit point of view, would that help this type of process in the future, or would it make it obsolete? I'll throw that out there for.
Where we're at with the degree audit system.
I know that they're actually testing some of that today. One of the other members of this AIP that was going to be on this panel couldn't make this time because she's involved in testing the degree audit right now. So they're on campus doing some testing today. Any other questions for the panelists? All right.
Andrew,
Yes.
can I make one statement?
Yes.
I want to make clear that while I theoretically would never like to do this again, I think we have to do it again. And I think the degree audit will help with this, but I think what we found by trying to collect all of this data was that there are different processes in place across the campus, and it makes it difficult to make the comparisons. I think the degree audit will help with that, but I don't think it replaces this process. I think this process will still have to be in place, and we'll have to revisit it. When we do, I don't want to talk about. But I think we have to revisit it periodically. My concern, though, about revisiting this process is we do program evaluations, we do internal, we do external evaluations, and if we add this on, we're going to just be doing evaluations constantly. If there was a way, and I got no idea how to do this, but if there was a way to bring some of these evaluation processes together so that we're not constantly in an evaluation cycle, then I think this becomes more useful. But we have to remeasure, because if we don't, then we have no idea what any of our action processes have or have not accomplished. So while I don't relish the idea of doing this again, it's inevitable.
I kind of see about a 10-year window. That's about when I'll be retired. So maybe every 10 years or so.
Hi. I have a quick question for you. I did skim the report, but I didn't read it in great detail, so perhaps my question could be answered by a closer reading, so I apologize. But you're speaking mostly about quantitative data. Can you speak a little bit more about what the qualitative parts were? And in particular, what's coming to mind as I was listening to you all is I'm about elbow deep in graduation applications right now. It's graduation application season. And I know my department used to have an exit interview, an exit survey when students were filling out their graduation applications. In your work, was that a factor? Was that a data point? And I wonder if we have a standardized form for departments. I mean, this could be something moving forward. Again, not to miss that qualitative component that I think is very important to illuminate some of the quantitative. Do departments use exit interviews, exit surveys? Were they part of what you looked at? And could we move forward with that? Because as we're talking about, yeah, we'll talk to alumni 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, whatever, but it's also a critical point when they're about to leave us. They can reflect upon their years here, and actually I think it could be really interesting, a really interesting data point.
I'll tackle that one first and then throw it back to the panelist. The easy answer to that is no, we did not look at specifically exit interviews, and mainly because it's so intermittent in terms of which departments do and which departments don't do exit interviews. Some departments track their alumni very well, and so they could tell you how well they're doing, do they have jobs, all sorts of things. Other departments don't have very good ties to their alumni. The overall alumni surveys that we do are, again, as Alan pointed out, have a very low rate of response. But in terms of exit interviews, it was too, we never tried to collect it, but it was clear from getting the feedback from departments that only a few departments are doing that. So I don't know if any of the other panelists want to address that, or?
I wanted to say a little bit about the qualitative data. So we did surveys of department chairs, and I think when we do this again, we'll get more consistent quality from our qualitative surveys. So what I mean by that is many of our chairs did not really understand the process because it was all so new. And so the reports that we got back from departments were very different. They were all over the board in how long they were, how short they were. And I know our department chairs have a lot going on. They have, I think, one of the hardest jobs on campus, and they're always asked for information. And so to be able to determine, you know, how important is this other survey I'm getting, I think that'll sort itself out the next time we do this. But we did go back to department chairs. I've called departments for some of the programs I was looking at if we didn't understand something. So we really tried to get the qualitative data at the same level all across the board. And we asked them a variety of questions. What is the demand for your program? How does your program align with our strategic goals? Just a variety of questions. And that was also very important in our determination.
I love systematic data and gathering. I'm also mindful that an overuse of it is akin to that old line, you don't fatten a hog by weighing it. So the intervention is really important, and I think Alan's analysis that we do something and then assess it is vital. But part of that systematic collection of data, and I share the frustration this campus has about our graduates, I sometimes fantasize at commencement, couldn't we set up a kiosk in the bookstore? They cannot get those robes until they fill out this survey. And over here on commencement day is a huge line of the families concurrently telling us what they experienced in service for this campus. Some departments do retain very close connections, and I think the fact that others don't shouldn't prohibit us from looking at the tremendous success of those who do, which becomes then another triangulation of some of the things that the report found from the perspectives of chairs, as well as the national context. I just think that there are lots of opportunities for triangulation, and you might look at that as confirming or disconfirming evidence.
Just as a segue to our breakout sessions soon, I wanted to ask the panelists their perspectives on the questions listed under next steps in the AAIP process. You've talked about some general recommendations for what we should do, but for these specific questions, I'd be curious to hear your thoughts as a way to prime the pump for our breakouts that are coming soon. First, how should follow up with the challenge programs? Two, how do we balance investing in new programs with investing in current programs? And third, how do we help foster innovation in online, international, and interdisciplinary activities? Any one of those questions. I'd just be curious to hear the panelists, because not everyone will be able to hear your thoughts on that. So any one of those three you'd like to address.
I'll take the middle one, which was how do we balance investing in new programs with investing in current programs, and provide somewhat of a defensive response to that question. The final report of the task force focused on the ready to grow and the challenged and the new programs. And what's missing is the large middle, in that we have a lot of programs on this campus that are nationally renowned, internationally renowned, have a lot of satisfied graduates who are going on to productive and healthy lives. But they don't seem to be highlighted in a process like this. And I might call some of those programs stalwarts. They may be stars tomorrow. They may not wish to be stars tomorrow. They may have carved out a very distinctive niche that is by design small and scaled to what they perceive to be the size for our state, for our region, for our nation. So I know that the new programs will always attract a certain amount of attention and enthusiasm, and that's part of why we love our jobs, is to work on those initiatives. But sometimes the stalwarts are the bedrock of our campus as well.
I'll talk just a little bit about the last one then. At least two pieces of it, the online, international, and interdisciplinary. I'm not going to talk about the interdisciplinary because I have no experience, I mean the international because I have no experience within that particular realm. But I do have a little bit of experience with online and interdisciplinary. And I think if we talk about interdisciplinary, I think all of us have experienced the kind of siloed approach to academics. And I don't like using that term because I think it's overused and it represents more rigid boundaries than what actually exist. But it's difficult to know how to encourage faculty and then down the line students to become involved in interdisciplinary activities when it's very difficult for folks to be recognized for the efforts that they put into those processes. And I can tell you from experience, we just put together the Bachelor of Science degree in neuroscience. And that's an interdisciplinary major, and Jesse Hay and I are kind of running that right now. And it's an interesting process. I like doing it. I like working with the students. They're very bright. They're very energetic. But, you know, that's an interdisciplinary major that has no support in the sense that Jesse and I are figuring out how to do graduation papers and how to sign people in as majors. I mean, there's a lot of mechanical processes that go along with that that don't allow us to do the mentoring that we might like to be doing right now, right from the beginning, because we're doing all those other mechanical processes. And so I see that there are quite a few barriers in place for the idea of interdisciplinary. Everybody talks about it, they throw the word out there all the time, but how you actually mechanically put that into place is still a bit of a struggle. The online represents kind of another kind of a problem. And I'm speaking only from the psychology department perspective. I don't have any classes that are less than 60 or 70 students in my classes. And yet when I'm told, well, let's offer that class online, well, kind of the maximum I'm looking at there is 30 online, and so then I have more than half of the students that would normally take my class not able to take my class. And then on top of that, there are difficulties in terms of finding ways to encourage faculty to create more online more online content, because again, it's outside of the way we typically look at the institution and look at our duties. And so I think that, you know, as a reinforcement theorist, that we have to find real ways rather than just discussing it and saying, well, this should be reinforcing. We have to find actual reinforcers that encourage more online, more interdisciplinary. But again, it's going to require us to go back and look, well, is that working or not? And if it's not working, make an assessment as to why it's not working and see if you can create a system that does encourage or does reinforce these processes. I think there are people that find them inherently reinforcing to a point, and some of those folks will do this for a while and then they'll have enough and then they stop. So I think we have to create a system within the institution to support these processes, and we'll see increases in those then.
I agree. I think we must incentivize. I think if you look historically at the trend data, though, it validates exactly what Alan just said. We had a time when we incentivized faculty to put classes online, and we had growth at that point in time. Right now, we have incredible success in media arts, a beautiful online degree. I had an opportunity in the 90s to help put together the first fully online graduate degree at UM, and there were incentives to the department and the faculty for those. But to just expect you would translate 60 students to 2 online sections of 30 is not reasonable, and yet the context really is right now that everyone here is going to have to do a little bit more with a little bit less. That's why I think through inorganic growth, targeted investment, we could look at things you would need. I don't know if you have a TA for the class of 60, for example, but potentially looking at that person's role or an upgrade of her skills could give you a sense that it's doable. In addition to that, I think the report, the Butler did it final chapter, says here are a few places where there are unique opportunities, and rather than create new programs, with a targeted investment in a few of those, we could show and later test a return on that investment and see whether in fact that was well warranted. And my prediction would be it would be, because I trust the work of the AAIP, and I think the administrators here and the data we have are adequate to be able to assess some of the things we believe those investments could yield.
Jenny?
Okay, I'll take that hard one. How should UM follow up with challenge programs? I think we should follow up with challenge programs. I don't think we should just leave it sitting out there. I think we need to close the loop. So the department chairs have had a chance to comment, and that went into the report. And I know in my college we've met with the departments that have these challenge programs and have asked them questions. And I think it's our responsibility as a university to make these programs stronger, make them better than they are, or to say maybe the report, maybe there was just a small dip in numbers and that can be explained. Maybe they're not challenged, but I do think we need to follow up, and I do think we need to close the loop.
Thank you. So let's give the panel one last hand. Thank you all very much.
Good afternoon. We're down to the survivors of our two-day conference, and thank you all for sticking in there. It's been a wonderful 2 days. I go to a lot of meetings, as do you, and not all of them do you feel were a great use of your time. But I have to say that the last 2 days, I have come out of this energized and with a million ideas floating around in my head, and I hope you feel that way as well. From my point of view, it's been a tremendously successful couple of days, and exactly the kind of conversation that we need to have here at the University of Montana. I want to just take a few minutes to summarize some thoughts about the conference itself, and then talk to you about what I heard as sort of some of the main takeaway messages. But then I also want to itemize a number of to-do things that people have sent in to us as a result of their thinking about what they heard. So I want to remind us about this wonderful title, Defining a 21st Century Education for a Vibrant Democracy, because I think we did have that. We took that to heart as we carried out the conversations in detail over the past couple of days. This notion of defining, taking some action, and we'll have quite a few action steps come out of this. This notion of a 21st century education. We're looking forward. We're not dwelling on the past, not trying to just protect or preserve what we've been doing in the past, but reflectively looking at what we need to do going forward, what are the best things that we have done from the past, and how do they apply to the future. And then, of course, this notion of a vibrant democracy, which I just love as part of this title, the whole idea of opening doors for the citizens of Montana, for the citizens of our country, and building strong communities, again, based right here in Missoula, spreading across the world the influence that the University of Montana has. Throughout this discussion, the program was set up in a way to focus on several principal aspects of that title. One was this notion of workforce development, and we heard about that a couple of different ways. One is the notion of leadership. How do we educate people and help people become leaders? How do we produce an engaged citizenry? How we deliver the kind of education we want. We had a wonderful panel this morning on that topic. And then a in-detail discussion about the academic alignment and innovation program. And throughout the course of the couple of days here, we've talked about those ideals, those principles, in terms of our general education, in terms of our baccalaureate level programming, in terms of our 2-year programming, and again, in terms of how we actually deliver and manifest those ideas through those programs. We were inspired by absolutely wonderful keynoters. I'm so pleased with all 3 of the keynoters. Deborah Humphreys got us started off from ACNU, really focusing on gen ed and this idea of we don't have 2 distinct worlds here that we're talking about, a world of jobs and another world of the kind of education that we think we want to do, that's really just a false premise. Patty McGill-Peterson, who is sticking with us to the very end. Patty, I very much appreciate that, from ACE and the wonderful talk she gave on globalization, capitalizing on some of the notions that have come out of the International Lab project that Paulo and others have been working on, and really how that embodies so much of the spirit of what we do at the University of Montana. And of course, this morning, how fortunate it was that we got the Secretary of Labor to come to Missoula, Montana, to give us his talk, and I thought he was a dynamic speaker and just a wonderfully inspirational person to listen to. I think he has developed a bit of a spot in his heart for the University of Montana. Offline, he told me that in the past couple of years he's come back to Montana and with his family and spent a couple of weeks here doing all of the usual Montana things. And so I think we've developed a good friend in Tom Perez. So those keynoters really helped set the stage and give us inspiration. But then we moved on to the panels that discussed all of our topics in quite a bit of detail. And again, I was so pleased with the deep thinking that people put into the panel presentations. Everybody had prepared for their particular topic, and I thought gave very insightful comments, and again, comments that caused me anyhow to think pretty deeply about what we're doing, and I think they did to you as well. Those panels included faculty members, staff members, students, and even some community members. So good design of the panels, all of you who were in charge of those. And of course then the roundtable discussions or the breakout groups where you were able to get into these topics in quite a bit of detail, and I look forward to hearing feedback that comes out of many of those groups as we go throughout the next several weeks. It took a great deal of work to set this up, no question about it, and from my point of view, it went flawlessly. And so I want to take this opportunity to once again ask Rebecca and Nathan and all of the members of the planning committee. Their names are on the inside back cover of the program if you haven't had a chance to look there. But again, would you stand up and let us thank you for a superb job. You folks can go into the conference planning business. You did a great job. So what are some of the main messages? So I've made a list of the things that I've either heard or synthesized out of the conversation over the past couple of days. And I'd like to talk through those with you, and you may have heard some similar things or some different things, and so I'll be interested in hearing your feedback. But first, one message that I heard was, in fact, a reaffirmation of the underlying principles through which we deliver an education here at the University of Montana. One message that I want to give all of us is that we should take tremendous pride in what we are doing and how we deliver that education. We do this with our students at heart. We do this with nothing but the best intentions of delivering an education that does open doors for those people and that does contribute to our societies. So I think that we want to take tremendous pride in what we do, and I want us to give ourselves a round of applause for challenging ourselves to think the way that we have over the past couple of days and for the hard work that we have all been doing over these years. So give yourself a round of applause. The second message is sort of the flip side of that, and that is I heard a very challenging message that as an institution of higher education, we need to continually adapt. We need to adjust our curriculum. We need to adjust our delivery methods to today's world, and we need to constantly think to ourselves, challenge ourselves with the kind of thing we did through AAIP. What is the academic portfolio, and what are the delivery methods that are most effective in today's world, and that will produce the kind of outcomes that we want? The outcomes around an engaged citizenry, the outcomes around leadership, and the outcomes around a prepared set of graduates. So the challenge is there to continually adapt, and along with that, we need to give ourselves the license to be creative. Sometimes I think we get a little bit stuck in a rut, not just we, but higher education, and we don't necessarily think we have the license to be creative. I think this conference gives us that as a group of innovative thinkers here. And so let's make the best of that. Let's use this time to be as creative as we possibly can to build a model university for the 21st century. Another message, we need to embrace and relentlessly advocate for the continuum of educational opportunities that we provide at this university and that are so important in today's world. All of this, all of the education that we provide, it's about preparation for life. Somebody said that somewhere along the way during the last couple of days. Preparation for life. Well, life includes a job for most people. Life includes leadership opportunities, whether it's your local PTA or becoming the President of the United States. We will all of our graduates will have leadership opportunities at some level, and we need to prepare them for those opportunities. Life includes being a citizen of your respective community and actively participating in that community, and life includes personal fulfillment. We have a wide range of programming, again, ranging from some programs that are very clearly there to produce a graduate who can go to work using that specific set of skills. We have a range of programs that prepare students to go to work doing the most complex problem solving and creative thinking in our country, in our world. And we need to embrace that whole spectrum of programs that we have and communicate to ourselves, constantly remind ourselves, but also constantly remind our public, our students, our policymakers, our general public, that that's what we're about at the University of Montana. It is a broad spectrum of programming. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with this end of the spectrum or this end of the spectrum. We have to do it all. We have a very complex mission, a very complex responsibility as an institution, and let's embrace that. I liked what Tom Perez said. He used a phrase, I think it was him this morning, critical skills, critical thinking. And it sort of captured to me that spectrum of academic programming that is present here. Sort of following on that, I don't know that this exactly came out of this conference, but it certainly is a thought that comes to me as a result of sitting through these sessions the last couple of days. Every one of us is a recruiter. Every one of us is a recruiter. You may not be the person who's writing the letters to those prospective students or knocking on the doors or going out into the high schools, but one way or another, every one of us is a recruiter because we all talk to people who are outside of this university, whether they're people on the street, family members, and so on. We all are in a role of being able to help prospective students and prospective faculty and prospective staff members and so on. We're all in a position to help them see the tremendous value of what we do here and the outcomes of what we do here. So please keep in mind, from my point of view, every one of us is a recruiter. Well, now I want to turn to some of the implementation items. So I've made a list of things that we just, in my reading of what we talked about today, we have to move forward on. So the first of those is general education. I am convinced that now is the time to mobilize a task force around general education, time to reform general education. You know, we've brought this topic up a few times, and there's always a little bit of a sense of wariness, or some people characterize it as gen ed fatigue, and I appreciate that for the people who work day in and day out on general education. But, you know, that's as important as that is, that's a small fraction of people relative to the number of people that we have that can think creatively about gen ed. So let's mobilize a group of people to think about general education and what is the model general education program in today's world. What would that look like? What would be the outcomes of that? How do we implement it? Not an easy task. I fully appreciate that, and not something that's going to be done in this academic year alone. But let's get started on it and make the University of Montana the place that gets gen ed right for the 21st century. Second implementation step relates to the AAIP. So we had a great deal of good work done on the part of the AAIP group, and you just heard from them a few minutes ago. Let's implement AAIP recommendations. We won't do them all overnight. We need to pace ourselves. We need to take clear, careful stock of our resource base and what it will take to make the changes, to strengthen those programs, to start new programs, and even to take action with some programs that may not be relevant to our portfolio any longer. But let's begin in a serious way the implementation of AAIP. At my State of the University address in August, I said that it was time, I felt it was time to review the strategic plan for the university. And coming out of the last couple of days, I feel even stronger about that. I think the great ideas that have been floating around in the last few days now position us well to sit down and think about, okay, how do we address that first overall strategic goal about partnering for student success? How do we create an education for the global century? All of the main headings that we have in our strategic plan, we would be well served by revisiting each of those and saying what strategies have been working, what strategies do we need to modify, and how are we measuring? Do we know if we're measuring our progress on those strategies in an effective way? So let's move forward on updating that strategic plan. Another implementation item that we heard strongly last night and then again this morning is this issue of engaging with the private sector. And I'll extend that even beyond the private sector. I think it has to do with engaging with our policymakers, engaging with the nonprofit sector, and so on, engaging with our constituents, people who ultimately make use of our graduates, who make use of the ideas that are generated in our research laboratories, and so on. So let's get about a more aggressive, a more systematic plan for engaging with our constituents, our private sector, and other friends. The notion of apprenticeships has come up many times over the past couple of days. That is one way of engaging with the private sector, one particular strategy, and I think there are great opportunities there for us. Next, let's move forward on implementing the ideas out of the Internationalization Laboratory project that we've been through this past year with ACE. And we heard a number of interesting suggestions about internationalization in ways that don't necessarily require thinking only about major study abroad opportunities. What are the other ways that we can internationalize or globalize our curriculum and our student exposure to those ideals without necessarily a semester-long study abroad, or sometimes without even a trip abroad at all? Patty, I think, made a very good case that there are many of our students who will never be in a position to study abroad for very good, very important reasons. That doesn't mean that we can't give them an international or a global experience. So how do we do that? What are the actual mechanisms that we use? So many specific detailed suggestions under that category. Now, so those were some of my main observations / implementation items. Then I've been, like I said, receiving some emails from various people, and I just want to read what those suggestions have been. Some of them overlap with what I said earlier, but others are just other standalone items. So one came in that said, let's do more with peer mentoring and alumni mentoring and retiree mentoring, making use of those human resources to help our students in a mentoring sense. And I think that's a great idea to consider. Another suggestion came in, focus more on these 2+2 programs, more interactions with the tribal colleges, with the community colleges, even with our own Missoula College, and get more 2+2s in place so that students have more opportunities to begin their education at a in a two-year setting and move through then to a full baccalaureate setting. Online and certificate programs were sort of part of that same recommendation. Another recommendation came in, let's increase our exchange opportunities with tribal entities. In other words, we're all about exposing our students to other cultures, and we have a very vibrant culture right here in Montana and the surrounding states with our Native American communities, and let's increase our interactions with them as well. Course development incentives for general education. We have, in the Global Leadership Initiative, put in place a pretty good incentive program for faculty members to teach those freshman seminars and so on. Why not do that around novel ideas in general education? Are there ways of incentivizing faculty members and others to think about course development around general education? An interesting idea. And then finally, the notion of pathways through general education, more definition of how a student can benefit optimally from the proper selection of general education courses and sequences of courses and so on. A great idea. I mean, get away from this, the notion of the random walk through general education courses and put some deliberateness behind it. Well, so those are my thoughts at 3:40 in the afternoon after a really delightful couple of days. And so I want to say thank you for everyone who participated. It was one of the most dynamic conversations I think we've had at the university in recent years, and I'm very proud of everybody for participating, very appreciative of the contributions that you've made. So let's follow up on all of these great ideas now over the next few weeks and get some plans in place. Thank you for coming, and I hope that you enjoyed the conference as much as I did. All right.